So hello. So this is the next presentation with regards to the user stories that are in relation to the digital product passport. This presentation is done by two people. Also one is Marvin Böll, that's me. I'm from DKI VDE. And my dear colleague, I only know him as Moni, before I butcher his name, from POLIMI. And we work together within the CIRPAS consortium to define as many use cases, user stories as possible, which were mostly focused around the ESPR. This is how we went over it, how we the methodology on how we came to the different use cases. As you can see, there's a standard for everything, so even for the methodology on how to reach use cases. I don't expect you too much to understand the very complicated graph, just to let you know, in order to reach the different use cases that we were able to define, we had several sources of input. One is, of course, the different regulations, which is, for example, the ESPR, as well as the battery passport, but also others. And of course, other initiatives that were also looking into the standard into the DPP. One of them being the battery pass and the stand ICT report, but also many others. As a disclaimer, we couldn't define all possible user stories that are out there, but we focused on the one from the regulation to have at least the minimum requirements being identified. And the purpose of the user stories was not, as I said, not to cover everything, but at least to have some common ground that we can start to discuss on. This is still ongoing work. I'm not sure, also I'm pretty sure we will not be finished this with CIRPAS 1. Maybe with CIRPAS X or something like that, but this is still ongoing work. So the next few slides, I will give the word to my dear colleague Moni. Moni, to you. Also, I have the pointer in my hand, so whenever you want to go to the next slide, please let me know.
Okay, thank you, Marvin. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Abdelrahman. I'm a PhD candidate from Politecnico di Milano. And to start with the user stories, I want to do a quick reminder that with user stories, we focus on the interactions with the DPP system. And here we're interested in the different actors that will be part of the ecosystem around the digital product passport and how we can derive, of course, the specifications of a DPP system by these interactions. So we follow the life cycle of a DPP from its birth till its death. So we can start, next please, Marvin, with the issuing of a DPP. And in here, we take from the ESPR the requirement of a responsible economic operator wanting to place the product on the market and issue the digital product passport of that product to comply with the relevant delegated acts. And then we can go forward with the different interactions throughout the life cycle. So we can see from the point of view of reading a digital product passport, whether we're talking about the default access of a public user or some specific restricted access. And of course, we go forward with the writing to DPP, in particular of interest to the circular economy operators, more downstream. And they would require and have the need to update a DPP in order to provide more dynamic information about the products. And in some cases, there will be also a transfer of responsibility of a digital product passport between these operators. So we dedicate a specific place to explore the options around how that can work from the system's perspective. And finally, the life cycle of a digital product passport can outlive a company's operations. So it's important to assure that there is a method to access backed up data. And in a case also of a company going out of business, they can communicate how to reach the backed up data. And finally, next please, we can explore the final deactivation story. Another click, Marvin, please. And here we derive actually this story from the battery regulation, where it's mentioned that a DPP would cease to exist after recycling. So one option of deactivating a DPP is as a recycler wanting to retrieve the DPP data from the product's data carrier to optimize their operation, but also to deactivate the digital product passport of recycled products. Next, please. So in total, just considering these clusters of life cycle of a DPP, we have different actors that are considered in the stories. So responsible economic operator with a RIO, which we see here is the one placing the product in the market, issuing the DPP. Many different circular economy operators, just as an example, we see a recycler in the deactivation, but also public users and public authorities, such as market surveillance. We also consider the customs and their needs. And finally, the DPP service providers. Next slide, please. This is where we are at. We have these 10 categories for the stories. As you can see, we started with the issuing of a DPP, but then we elaborated a little bit about the reading activities. So we can see reading with default or restricted access, but also of interest might be the batch reading of DPPs before the purchase and specific requirements for the access by authorities to a DPP. As for the writing, similar approach has been taken. So we present different options of how the writing operations can look like. So for example, you can envision a repairer writing it to an original responsible economic operators repository, or choosing to write into another data repository. Finally, we have the access of the backup, the transfer of responsibility, deactivation, and we finalize it with some options and considerations to think about regarding the deactivation. Next, please. So for each of these 10 stories, we specify the steps of interaction with the system and extract the technical requirements for the DPP system. And more, of course, on that would be presented in the later presentation. But equally important, also to identify the gaps in standardization that would be needed to realize such a system. So next, please. So now we'll just go into a user story of reading, just to give a flavor of how these steps will look like. So next, please. So in this story, it's the generic reading story. So the point of view here is an actor in the circular economy who wants to retrieve DPP data from a data carrier that is physically on the product. And we have some assumptions to this story. So first, the user can use a DPP capable app on their mobile phone, and we've seen some examples of how this app might look like. But the user can also just use their camera app on their phone and read, in this example, a QR code, or can use other technologies. So we can think of an RFID reader on a conveyor belt. So that's still reading a data carrier that's physically on the product. So the first step would be how the user would interact with the data carrier in order to read the DPP data. The user then, in the second step of the story, would request all the available links using an element of the architecture, which is the resolution service component. Now, the component can be managed either by the economic operator who placed the product in the market. So in the last slide, the responsible economic operator, or it can be a service provider acting on their behalf. So what we said as a DPP service provider. And there are no restrictions about the app. The app can run locally or it can be server-based. The third element is about the element of the architecture, which is the resolution, responding back with the list of links and their link types. The fourth step is how the product, the granularity of the product will define how exactly this interaction will go. So if it's already identified at an item level, unique identifier and the user is interested in even downstream data, the app can show this information. Now, a fifth optional step will give us a little hint about a requirement for the app that the DPP-capable app can even select the links and send query directly to them. The sixth step is about the data sources receiving the request at the appropriate, of course, access level of the querying party. And the app always receives machine-readable information, of course, from the different data sources that are decentralized. The final step is the interface to the human. So we can see either a DPP-capable app or the web browser, just a regular HTML format in order to receive the data, make it human-readable and easy to access. So back to you, Marvin. Thank you.
Yeah, as a summary, why did we do all that? One thing that we try to do is to somehow see if for the information flows, for the data flows and the components that architecture, a DPP architecture is being composed of, if there are any gaps within the standardization landscape. And if you take now a look at this particular table, so if you paid attention to the previous three presentations, you might see that this is actually the same. So what we have here on the left is areas of standardization. This is in line with the work of the standardization request ad hoc group, where we try to see which areas, areas need to be standardized with regards to the components of the architecture and the data flows. On the right, what we did is to see if the 9 user stories that we identified reveal any gaps, so to speak. Also the good news is for 8 areas of standardization, there are a lot of standards out there, so a lot is covered. What we didn't do is to go into the specific standards to see if how well they perform for the different steps, so to speak. The table on the left, also the right column, is still under discussion. But these are the first indications based on the discussion within the CEPAS consortium and the implication what the different data flows and components mean for the standardization landscape. Unique identifiers was one of the dominant topics that we had, and the good news is there are a lot of standards already out there for the ID schemes, and they are able to coexist from our first assessment. But since it is still unclear how well they are interoperable, one thing might be that within the EU registration that you need to consider all the ID schemes that are out there. The mechanisms for the access rights per se, there are quite a lot out there. So I think this is then contention, part of the delegated acts, also which data need to be accessed by whom. One area that we see is a little bit of a larger gap, or it could be a larger gap, is the interoperability with regards to the data processing, data exchange protocols, and so on. One way to do this is, of course, to use the same vocabulary. Also, you use all the same data, which is quite unrealistic because the different sectors already have their own vocabularies. But what we could be done is, for example, also one way to do is to look if the data structures, also the information models, are also if they are interoperable. Also this one is what we haven't done yet. Data storage and data authentication. This requires a little bit more of clarification, since to our understanding this will also a little bit be dependent on the delegated acts, also how the data should be handled. And the last one, API, this is I think what from our perspective most understand when they hear DPP are the different ways to access the data, so basically apps and stuff. And as you saw maybe from the presentation of Ms. Ms. Baumgartel, I hope the name is correct, and Mr. Gehring, is that there are also different requirements to specifically the API that overlap with the previous 7 areas of standardization, like data processing, like authentication, like security, and so on. So this is something that we also need to look into. So with this one, I think I took a little bit too much time, so I apologize for that one. If there are any questions?
No questions.
No questions.